Well, we are back with another episode of the Jag Bros. We are three Jaguars fans, diehard fans, three brothers. I am Jack, along with my two brothers, JT and Joey. The NFL season for 2024-2025 has ended. The Philadelphia Eagles demolished the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. The three-peat is not going to happen for the Chiefs, which all of America pretty much celebrates, other than Kansas City Chiefs fans and Swifties. But we are going to talk a little bit about, in just a minute, some thoughts. What can the Jaguars learn from the Eagles' success, the Chiefs' failures at the end of the season? But we're also going to spend some time talking about Jaguars-centered news. The coaching staff is officially filled, and GM interviews are happening all week. But before we get into that, JT, what were your thoughts Sunday night on the Super Bowl?
You know, before the game, I was talking with some friends, and I was saying it felt like the Eagles had the better team, but the Chiefs had the better quarterback and the better coach. So it's going to be interesting to see who would actually prevail, especially if it's a close game. And all we saw is the better team just came out and dominated. I don't know if the Chiefs were expecting to win and they took it a little lighter than they typically would. But it looked like one of those things where, hey, they probably should have spent a little bit extra time in the film room, a little bit extra time in it. But look, the Eagles' game plan is relatively easy, right? It's straightforward. It's to run the ball, both with Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley. And it's less around scheme and more of, are you man enough and talented enough to stop it? And for the most part, the Chiefs were not able to do that.
Eagles' defensive line just shut down the Chiefs, and the Chiefs had no answer. Patrick Mahomes was holding on to the ball too long, and when he was scrambling, all four defenders were in the backfield. It wasn't just the edge guys. They were getting big push on the inside as well. And the defense line just took over the game. If you could give MVP to a whole position, it would have been the Eagles defensive line. And it just kind of shows you how dominant, if you have that front four going, you handle the game. They had nothing. They had a few late garbage touchdowns to make it kind of look a little bit better, but the Eagles handled that game the entire time.
100%. And the crazy stat is that the Eagles sent 0 blitzes all game. And we saw them do to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs something, frankly, I don't know that we've ever seen happen. Just completely manhandle that line. Mahomes had no time. I mean, the Chiefs offense well into the third quarter had under 50 yards. It was a disaster for the Chiefs, and the exciting part for the Jaguars, to me, is two things. Number one, the Eagles have given you a blueprint of, if you can draft extremely well. We saw their second-round pick, Cooper DeJean, have a pick 6. We saw their first-round pick, Quinyon Mitchell, have a fantastic rookie season as well. Several other young players just be dominant on the Eagles' defense. And then number two, the exciting thing is it feels like the Chiefs' grip on the NFL and potentially the AFC is loosening. It'll be very interesting to see, what does this mean for the future of Travis Kelce, Andy Reid, a lot of these guys that are getting more towards the tail end of their career. And the AFC could all of a sudden be very, very open for an up-and-coming team like the Jags.
Well, you still have to navigate Lamar and Josh Allen in the AFC. And I think Andy Reid said that he's coming back, but I would be very skeptical of Kelce actually coming back. But you say that it's the first time we've seen this blueprint, but we've actually seen this blueprint multiple times, including with the Giants when they upset Tom Brady, a much, much weaker Giants team than what we saw with the Eagles. But this goes back to what I was saying, and you guys were poo-pooing it a couple of months ago. Look, Go draft a defensive end. You can never have enough pass rushers. And I don't care if you are already quote unquote set at that position. You see what it looks like when it's dominant and it bails out some other kind of back end potential gaps on the team. And look, they also have a very good secondary. DeJean's turned out to be a stud. Mitchell's great. Slay's great. CJ Johnson, Gardner Johnson's great too. So they've got a great secondary too, but it's only magnified because of how well that front four played.
I'll give you props, JT. You called a couple months ago the Abdul Carter rise, that he was your favorite potential pick for the Jags. And now all of a sudden the reality is he may not even be available at 5, which has been crazy to see. Obviously, the comp for him is potentially Micah Parsons just because of the similar trajectory, similar college. But there are a ton of Jags fans that are going to love going if Abdul Carter falls to 5 or Mason Graham getting someone who can get after the passer on the defensive line. You've got Josh Hines Allen, you've got Trayvon Walker, but we've talked about this the last 2+ years in Jacksonville. No one else can really blitz or have any impact.
Yeah, and we'll talk a lot more about the draft and free agency and what do we do at some of the key positions during the offseason. But really what we want to focus our time today on is a lot of the coaching hires that Jacksonville's been making. And so for those that are not aware, we are in the active interview process this week and last week on the GM. So no announcements yet. Maybe we'll add a couple of speculations toward the end. But what we have seen is the 2 coordinators hired, both the offense and the defensive side of the ball secured. Where do we want to start, guys? You want to start on the defensive side or the offense?
Let's start defense because offense, the coordinator is going to be important, but defense is going to be magnified because Liam Coen is going to still call the plays. That's something Shad Khan wants. That's Liam Coen's specialty. And so the defensive coordinator, to me, is going to have, number one, a bigger impact and role, but number two, a much more difficult, challenging job because the Jags defense was pathetic last year.
And so the Jaguars got Anthony Campanile from the Green Bay Packers. He spent the last season as a linebackers coach for them. Previous to that, he was on the staff of the Dolphins for a few years under, I believe, Vic Fangio during that time, as well as a couple other guys. Been a co-defensive coordinator at Boston College. Spent some time in college before coming to the NFL. Joey, I think you were really high on this guy, and he was either your number 1 or number 2 targets as a defensive coordinator. What made him so high on your eyes, and what are you hoping to see for Jacksonville's defense next year?
I wanted us to go interview him before we even announced that we were interviewing him. I thought the Green Bay Packers, he was the run defense coordinator and linebackers coach. I feel like linebacker coaches make the best defensive coordinators. Linebackers are kind of the quarterback of the defense. Boye will really learn from him being able to direct the line and the secondary. And then he had such a great time in the Dolphins back when they had a really good defense. He got to work with Bradley Chubb. He was having the most sacks that the Dolphins have ever had. Really aggressive, downhill, sure tackling team. And then you also saw that in Green Bay. They were very good against the run and was a downhill defense. And that's exactly what I feel like the Jaguars need. This whole switching or playing like, I would say catch, letting the offense dictate what to do and you just kind of catching them and trying to make a tackle, making sure that they don't get too far down the field. And the amount of times that we just allowed long developing drives, that's not what this guy's going to be about. It's going to be a lot of tackling, blitz, coming at it, multiple guys, and really making offenses dictate around you. You are controlling the defensive line, controlling the pace, and bringing hard-hitting, hard attitude, fierce defense.
Those are the big words: hard-hitting, hard attitude. And in many ways, I look at the Campanile hire as hopefully a very, very good fit with Cohen's personality. We've obviously seen him do a bunch of interviews. He's got kind of a goofy side. Let's just be real. There was the Duval heard all around the world with his, interesting interpretation of the way that we always close our episode in the Jaguars chant. He's funny, he's goofy, he's clearly an offensive mind. But then you look at Campanile, he's got this intensity, this fire, this passion. He's got a ton of coaching experience with nearly 2 decades coaching football. And his focus at Green Bay, which again is going to be a big need for the Jaguars, was he was not only the linebackers coach, but also the run game coordinator. So you look at some of the stats last year for the Packers, they limited opposing offenses to 4.0 yards per carry. That was 3rd in the NFL. Under 100 yards, so 99.4 rushing yards per game, which was 7th. And that was the best number for the Green Bay's rush defense since 2016. He also helped their rookie linebacker, Edrin Cooper, as their linebackers coach, have a breakout season as a rookie. He was the NFC Defensive Rookie of the Month for December, even with an NFC with Jared Verse and Fisk. That's going to be big for the Jaguars defense. You're going to see a lot of young talent. You're going to see, I believe, a lot of draft picks this season and next season go on the defensive side of the ball. And hopefully you're going to see some draft and development out of a guy like Campanile and the rest of his staff that he hired.
I don't think this is like a Ryan Nielsen situation, right? Where you get this guy who supposedly had a better defense than you. But Jack, I love the stats that you hit us with. A lot of the key metrics that he was responsible for, he's top 5 or top 10 at least. Most of the stuff Ryan Nielsen was kind of mid, like kind of 14 to 22. As a defensive coordinator in Atlanta the year before. And then I think he was top 5 in third down defense, which is highly variable based off yards and a lot of other factors. This is a much bigger step up. Now, granted, he wasn't the defensive coordinator, so maybe this is a position that's too big for him. That remains to be seen. But he is somebody that a lot of people were saying were an up-and-comer. Joey, you mentioned that you had already pegged him as a good defensive coordinator candidate before we even started announcing who we were interviewing. So, look, I think this is a very nice hire, a hire Jacksonville can get excited about. And there's literally nowhere to go but up.
Yeah.
But both from a performance on the
from
field.
The bottom.
Exactly. From a performance on the field and most likely from a draft and free agency personnel perspective, I would expect Jacksonville's defense to be at least 10 to 15 points better from 31st or 32nd in almost every category to at least average.
I have no issue with him. I mean, I think he's the most ready defensive coordinator that I've seen. If you go watch his Hard Knocks videos, I mean, the way he leads and talks, it very much seems like he's ready for being a defensive coordinator. And honestly, with a good year or two, we could be struggling to keep him here because I could see him getting a lot of interest. He seems to be a very much up-and-comer.
Which, as you look across the board at all these moves, there is a high level of risk because you look at Campanile, you look obviously at Liam Coen, and we'll talk about in a minute the offensive side of the ball, and Udinski, and just a lot of the positional groups as well. A lot of these are promotions and first-time opportunities for guys like Campanile, who's never been a DC before. But I personally like it because it's either going to work and it's going to be amazing, or you know what, we're going to have to do another reboot and relaunch. But this feels like the ultimate high risk, high reward moves in Jacksonville, where I feel like a lot of times, especially with Balky, we would make some high risk and like medium reward moves. And there is an opportunity where Campanile is this up and coming guy, and a lot of these guys that he's brought with him from Green Bay can bring a potentially top 10 to 15 level defense, and all of a sudden a major weakness can maybe not be a major strength, but less of a liability for the Jaguars. And yeah, Joey, I got to give you a lot of props because a lot of Jags fans were leaning the Patrick Graham route. People were kind of pounding the table for him. He's the guy, he's the guy, he's the guy. And you kept saying
that's such a Jaguars pick, Patrick Graham.
Exactly. That would be the definition of a high risk, medium reward. He has experience, but he hasn't put up good results.
Any success.
Well, see, I would have the dream scenario. I agree with you on Patrick Graham, but the dream scenario would have been to get Robert Saleh as the defensive coordinator.
Yeah,
obviously,
he went too quick.
He went too quick, and he went to San Francisco. But that to me is like, hey, how do you turn this like A- for my perspective to an A+? You get somebody like a Spagnuolo for Andy Reid, like a Vic Fangio with the Eagles, or which I think Robert Saleh is kind of the perfect one, where everywhere he's gone, his defenses have performed very, very well. And every time he leaves, their defenses get significantly worse. So clearly, whatever he's doing from a coordinating perspective is really good. He's just failed at the head coach level. So that's one step too far for him. Spagnuolo, same type of thing. So could you find one of these defensive coordinators who could honestly add a level of quote unquote maturity to the room, considering there is so much young, up and coming, Jack, you said high risk, high reward in the coaching staff, and most likely the GM too. So that personally, I would have loved a head coach of the defense of somebody who's had that position before. I felt like when Del Rio was the most successful years that he had, it was when he was filled with a lot of kind of ex-coaches, ex-head coaches at kind of key positions within the organization.
Yeah, but I feel like the way that we're getting our coaches, these young up-and-comers, it almost feels like we're trying to get talent almost like drafting. We're getting these young guys who have high potential but may or may not pan out. But for so long, we've been just like free agent-esque, like getting an older guy who's had middle-of-the-road success. And
but that's what I'm saying. You don't find somebody.
Here.
Yeah. Patrick Graham is exactly who you're describing. I agree with you. We should pass on him.
Patrick Graham is Ryan Nielsen.
Yes, exactly.
But
find somebody who's already had that.
You couldn't be doing the whole head coach thing and be like, hey, even though we don't want you as a head coach, could you be the defensive coordinator?
Sure, you could.
I think you would have. He didn't like that. The whole thing of he wanted Liam Coen way more than they wanted him. He canceled his flight right away. Like, if we made our intentions known, like, hey, we'll match whatever the 49ers give you as a defensive coordinator, that would have been your, like, hope. But don't interview me to be a head coach and then offer me defensive coordinator.
Fair. And I'm not saying that Robert Saleh was that guy. Like, there are other guys that would fit that type of bill. And if the 49ers are saying you're good enough to be our defensive coordinator, clearly he's good enough to be the Jaguars defensive coordinator, in my opinion. If you were told you could have this position or that position, you choose the 49ers every day, unless Jacksonville, and not apples to apples, unless Jacksonville really like overpays for you. So I hear what you're saying. And you're right, Joey. We probably never really had a shot at Saleh based on how we decided to handle the head coaching interview process. But he's the type of guy that that would have got me at the A+, not Patrick Graham, but somebody that's actually been uber successful wherever they've gone as a defensive coordinator.
I wanted us to kick the tires on Gerard Mayo. I thought he was a very good defensive coordinator. I thought he actually overperformed as a head coach with how crappy the roster is for the Patriots. No one was expecting them to get 4 or 5 wins. And he went out, beat the Bengals, and had a few other wins that no one kind of expected them to have. And the second Vrabel showed interest, they kicked him to the curb. I felt sorry for him. But I thought he's a very good coach. That was a one that I feel like no one's kicked the tires, and I felt like that was a guy that we could have gone and interviewed. But I really liked Anthony Campanile.
Campanile's the guy. I like him. I think he is going to be hopefully the yin to Cohen's yang. You may see, Joey, as you were talking about earlier, the hard knocks, and we've probably seen these clips. Jaguar social media have posted. I mean, Campanile may be the guy giving the halftime speeches to pump up the Jags after a poor first half, because he's just got that level of intensity. So he brought in several position coaches as well. You can check that out on Jags Twitter, jags.com. But now looking at the offensive side of the ball, they bring in a young guy, 29 years old, actually younger than both you and I, JT. Joey, you still have him beat, slightly younger, but Grant Udinski. And he's a young, hotshot, big name. He actually had 5 offensive coordinator interviews with the Texans, the Bucs, the Seahawks, Jags, and Patriots, which always great to beat the Houston Texans and our new rival, the Bucs. But what are y'all's thoughts on Grant Udinski?
So he was at Baylor when I was at Baylor. He was a grad assistant under Matt Rule. And I remember hearing his name. I don't fully remember him, obviously, as he was such a small part of that Baylor team. That was a very good year for Baylor. We tied OU for the Big 12 championship, went to the Sugar Bowl. And then he actually followed Matt Rule to the Panthers the next year and coached with Matt Rule for 2 years before Matt Rule went back to college. And when he did that, Kevin O'Connell from the Vikings picked him up. And he's been with the Vikings since then, and he has really helped, from what I hear, Kirk Cousins when he was on the Vikings, and then also Sam Darnold. So he's worked with some quarterbacks that weren't the best, but had great years with the Vikings. He is the definition of up-and-comer. I think if you were looking at an offensive coordinator that actually needed to call plays and be more in charge, I don't think he would be ready. But with Liam Coen most likely, or he is running the offense and everything, this is a great spot for Grant Udinski to learn and then really start to get his feet wet and make an even more bigger name for himself. So he's had success kind of everywhere he's been. I love that he's has the Baylor ties, worked with Matt Rule, then Kevin O'Connell, and then now Liam Coen.
I love this hire as well. This is somebody who NFL insiders, the Vikings organization, to your point, Joey, a lot of people were after him. And for us to land him, I think is huge because he was a sought after candidate. I don't think he's going to necessarily call plays, but he is the kind of protege and waiting, right? Cohen is the guy who I think is going to have the biggest fingerprints all over the offense. But Grant seems to be a young guy that's pretty innovative. He's worked with some other top offensive minds, right? He would have worked with Joe Brady there in Carolina. He would have worked with, thank you, Kevin O'Connell. And so you're talking about a guy who is well respected, and this is kind of the viewpoint, right? Like this is projecting, but ideally, just like Doug Peterson was Andy Reid's one of his first and most successful offensive coordinators. That is kind of what this guy is going to be, similar to what Press Taylor was with Doug. I think most Jaguar fans would say he picked incorrectly with pouring so much time and energy and effort into Press Taylor. But that's the hope, is that Grant develops into a really special offensive coordinator and somebody that can ideally take some of the offensive game planning off of Liam Coen, or at least supplement him with some of the other information that he's gathered in his time.
Definitely. And then there's going to be quite a few people talking into Liam Cohen's ear, it seems like, with running this offense. You got Grant Udinski, obviously the offense coordinator. And then we have a passing game coordinator, Shane Waldro. No one's really happy about this hire, but it's Liam Cohen's friend. And actually, he got him the job with the Rams, kind of got him into the NFL. So I guess he owed him, how to make a spot for him. But we also have a quarterbacks coach, Spencer Whipple. His dad, everyone knows as Coach Whipple, very famous guy. And then we also have an offensive passing game specialist. You don't normally see both a passing game specialist and a passing game coordinator. Only few people do that. The Rams do it. Tampa Bay did it last year. And I believe it was the Vikings that also do it. So obviously Liam Coen taking advice from Sean McVay and Kevin O'Connell with this multiple passing game coordinators and specialists. He took John Van Dam from Tampa Bay, one of the only coaches to come from Tampa Bay to Jaguars. He was the tight end and offensive passing game specialist over there. So now he's going to be with Jacksonville. It'll be exciting to see with all these people what they can draw up. And also a name that I was excited about was the wide receivers coach, Edgar Bennett. He actually has offensive coordinator experience. He worked with Green Bay Packers from 2015 to 2017. He's been with the Rams as their Raiders as their wide receiver coach from 2018 all the way to 2024. So he's been there a long time. He's actually from Jacksonville, Florida, born here, 55, a lot of experience, played for Florida State, went to Lee High School in Jacksonville. So a great name to have here in Jacksonville.
For sure. And just spend a minute there on Waldron. I agree with you, Joey. That was the worst or the most frustrating of the hires. He's somebody who, if you ask Seahawk fan or Bears fans this past year, I think all of them would say that the offense is underperformed. Both with some of the weapons that the Seattle had, and then obviously with the development of Caleb Williams. Look, how much input he has, it remains to be seen. If it's a situation where he's trying to help his friend out and there's multiple people involved in the passing game development, fine. But hopefully Shane Waldron does not actually have that much of an influence on what actually gets called. But look, I like what he's done. I like some of the people that he's putting in place. And I think that the key is to unlock that passing attack. And if he's done that with Will Levis in college, he's done that with Stafford in his time in the Rams, then he's did that with Baker. And so I think Trevor has the ceiling to play just as well as all those guys did, and they won at a pretty high clip. So I'm excited to see what it is. I've seen some of the stats out there saying that he is the worst hire so far in this coaching cycle. I think a lot of that is driven by that Duval comment that he did. because otherwise it's a great hire. It may not be Ben Johnson, but who knows? It feels like he could have just as high of a ceiling, or at least a better situation than where Ben Johnson ended up going to.
I mean, I think also a lot of people were higher on him until the Jaguars get him. It happens always like, oh, this guy's so good. He goes to the Jaguars and they're like, actually, was he that good? Like, it's just kind
Exactly. So true.
of what happens. But I'm really excited. This is obviously something completely different than what we've been doing for like 10 years. So the excitement has been pumped back into the fan base. What we will see, honestly, I don't know. This team could be turned around immediately. You have the talent. We all knew that they're better than a 4-win team last year. They could really turn it around and get to the playoffs in their first season, or maybe take some time. I'm not sure, but at least it's exciting, and at least we're doing something different.
Oh, for sure. And so, look, we wanted to spend a few minutes here on this episode breaking down the coordinators and some of the other coaching hires. We'll certainly be back to talk about the GM. As I mentioned, there's several interviews going on this week. We'll talk about that. And then we'll probably take a little bit of a break and come back with you guys in early March to talk about free agency and start getting us prepped for the draft there in April. Joey, any final thoughts?
Not yet. I will have a lot more thoughts with the GM and free agent and draft, obviously. But as of right now, I'm just excited that all the coaching jobs are filled. A lot of excitement with the team, a lot of new things going on. So just honestly pumped for next season.
I love it. Yeah. So if you guys haven't already, follow us on Twitter. We're also on YouTube. So sometimes you'll see us do mock drafts or break down a specific player the Jaguars may be targeting. It's always fun to interact with some of the fans on Twitter. Joey and Jack are oftentimes the ones leading that charge. So it's fun. And if you like the content, please leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to the podcasts. And with that, we will sign off. Dude.